Welcome to Mysteries to Solve. London, autumn 1888. Whitechapel. The fog is so thick you can taste it. Coal smoke, rot, and something else. Something metallic. A policeman named P.C. Neal is walking his beat down Bucks Row at 3:40 in the morning. He's done this walk 100 times. Nothing ever happens here. Tonight, something happened. He finds a woman lying on the pavement. Her throat has been cut so deep, her head is nearly severed. He thinks that's the worst of it. He is wrong. Because when the doctor arrives, he finds something far more disturbing. Mutilations so precise, so deliberate, that they will haunt investigators for the next 137 years. Her name was Mary Ann Nichols. She was the first. 4 more women will die in the next 10 weeks. The killer will never be caught. And to this day, right now, as you're watching this, historians, detectives, and amateur sleuths are still obsessed with one question. Who was Jack the Ripper? Today, I'm not just telling you the murders. Everyone's done that video. I'm giving you the actual suspects, the ones Scotland Yard investigated, the ones with motive, opportunity, and in some cases, a confession. Stay to the end, because suspect number 1 on this list was named by police themselves as their prime suspect. And what happened to him 3 weeks after the final murder will give you chills.
Let's set the board. Between August and November 1888, at least 5 women were murdered in the Whitechapel district of London's East End, an area so poor, so overcrowded, that police called it the Abyss. The victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are known today as the Canonical Five. All were working-class women. Several were forced into sex work to survive. All were killed at night, in public or semi-public spaces, with a level of anatomical precision that terrified Victorian London. Catherine Eddowes' murder was so fast, so silent, that a police officer walked past the alley just minutes before her body was found and heard nothing. Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim, was murdered indoors, and what was done to her body was so extreme that the responding officer reportedly could not speak for several minutes. The killer left almost no evidence, no fingerprints, that technology didn't exist yet, no witnesses who could give a reliable description, just a nickname taken from a taunting letter sent to the press. Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Whether that letter was even real or written by a journalist trying to sell newspapers is still debated today. But here's what most true crime channels won't tell you. Scotland Yard didn't investigate one suspect. They investigated hundreds. And a small handful of those names still hold up under modern scrutiny. Let's go through them, starting with the one police themselves considered their best lead.
In 1894, a senior Scotland Yard official named Sir Melville Macnaghten wrote a private memo. In it, he named 3 suspects he considered more likely than any others to be Jack the Ripper. The first name on that list? Montague John Druitt. Druitt was a 31-year-old barrister and schoolteacher, educated, well-off, seemingly respectable. On paper, he's the last person you'd suspect. But here's where it gets strange. Weeks after the final canonical murder, Druitt lost his teaching job under mysterious circumstances. Some records suggest possible misconduct, though the details were never made public. Then, on December 31st, 1888, less than 2 months after Mary Kelly's murder, Druitt's body was pulled from the River Thames. Stones were found weighted in his pockets. It was ruled a suicide. Macnaghten's memo claimed Druitt's own family believed he was the Ripper, and that he was sexually insane. The problem? There's no hard evidence connecting Druitt to any of the murders. No physical evidence, no witness placing him in Whitechapel, nothing beyond a police official's private suspicion decades after the fact. But ask yourself this,
Why would the man leading the actual investigation write down that name? Unless something convinced him? We may never know, because 6 weeks after the murders stopped forever, Druitt was dead.
If Druitt is the police's first choice, this next man might be the modern answer. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant, a barber, living right in the heart of Whitechapel, walking distance from nearly every murder site. Kosminski shows up by name in the same McNaughton memo. Police records describe him as having strong homicidal tendencies and a great hatred of women. He was eventually committed to a mental asylum in 1891, where he lived out the rest of his life. For over a century, Kosminski was just one name on a long list. Then, in 2014, something happened that changed everything. A businessman named Russell Edwards purchased a shawl at auction, allegedly recovered from the body of Catherine Eddowes, one of the victims. He commissioned DNA testing on bloodstains and other biological material found on the fabric. The results, published by a molecular biologist, reportedly matched mitochondrial DNA to both Catherine Eddowes' living descendants and to a descendant of Aaron Kosminski. If true, this would be the single strongest piece of physical evidence in the entire 137-year mystery. But, and this matters, the scientific community is deeply divided. Critics point out the shawl's chain of custody is questionable at best. There's no solid proof it was ever actually at the crime scene. Mitochondrial DNA is also shared across many people in a maternal line, making the match far less exclusive than a full DNA profile. So, is Kosminski the answer? Maybe. Or maybe he's just the most convenient answer. A poor, mentally ill immigrant, blamed because society already wanted someone like him to be guilty. That tension between evidence and bias is something that follows almost every name on this list. Now here's a suspect almost nobody talks about, and he might be the most disturbing of them all. Dr. Francis Tumblety, an American conman posing as a physician, was actually arrested in London in November 1888, not initially for the murders, but on charges related to his personal life, which were criminalized at the time. Here's the disturbing part. Tumblety was known to hate women with an almost pathological intensity. Multiple sources describe him openly expressing contempt toward them. And according to a private letter written by a Scotland Yard inspector decades later, rediscovered in the 1990s, Tumblety was considered a very likely suspect by police at the time. Even stranger, Tumblety reportedly kept a private collection of anatomical specimens, including preserved human organs, for what he claimed were medical purposes. One of the Ripper's victims, Catherine Eddowes, was missing a kidney. Tumblety was arrested, held in custody, and then skipped bail and fled to France, then back to the United States, just as the murders in Whitechapel stopped completely. He was never extradited. He was never formally charged with the murders, and he died in 1903, taking whatever he knew to the grave. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's one of the tightest timelines of any suspect on this list.
Now, let's talk about the theory that refuses to die. The one that turned Jack the Ripper from a criminal case into a royal scandal. Some researchers have claimed that Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria and second in line to the throne, was either the killer himself or was being covered for by the crown. The theory goes further, that the prince secretly married a Catholic shopgirl, fathered a child, and that the murders were part of a royal cover-up to silence witnesses who knew the secret, allegedly orchestrated with help from the royal physician and, in some versions, the painter Walter Sickert. Sickert himself became a suspect in his own right in the 2000s after crime novelist Patricia Cornwell spent millions of dollars investigating him, even claiming DNA links between Sickert and the Ripper letters. Here's the honest truth. Historians overwhelmingly reject both theories. Prince Albert Victor has documented alibis placing him elsewhere during at least 2 of the murders. The Sickert DNA claims have been widely disputed by other forensic experts. But I include them
because they show you something important about this case. When a mystery goes unsolved for over a century, people don't just want an answer. They want the most dramatic answer. Royalty, cover-ups, secret marriages. It's irresistible. And it says as much about human psychology as it does about the murders themselves. So why, with modern forensics, with DNA, with everything we know now, can we still not say for certain who Jack the Ripper was? 3 reasons.
First, the era. Fingerprinting wasn't used by British police until over a decade later. Blood typing didn't exist. Crime scenes weren't preserved the way they are now. Witnesses trampled evidence, bodies were moved, and autopsy notes were inconsistent. Second, the press. Victorian newspapers were in a circulation war. Sensational reporting, fabricated letters, and public hysteria contaminated the case almost in real time, making it nearly impossible to separate fact from tabloid fiction, even for the police investigating it. Third, and maybe most importantly, the killer stopped. After Mary Kelly's murder in November 1888, the canonical killings simply ended. No confession, no capture, no further victims matching the pattern. Which means whoever did this either died, was institutionalized, emigrated, or simply decided to stop. And that unresolved silence is exactly why this case still grips us, generation after generation. So, Druitt, the barrister who drowned himself weeks after the murder stopped. Kosminski, the man whose DNA might place him at the scene. Tumblety, the woman-hating doctor who fled the country. Sickert and the royal conspiracy that refuses to die. 4 suspects, 4 sets of circumstantial evidence, 0 certainty. Here's my honest take. The evidence leans hardest toward Kosminski or Tumblety, but leans is not proves. And that's the maddening truth of true crime's most famous cold case. We may be one archive discovery, one forgotten letter away from finally knowing. Or we may never know at all. If you had to bet on one of these 4, which one would you pick? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this kept you hooked, subscribe, because next week I'm covering the case that even Jack the Ripper investigators called impossible to solve. A killer who may have struck before Whitechapel and never stopped after. See you then.